It's hard to believe that we are at week 7 already. And what's really nice about week 7 is it's the first time we ever talk about the ACT essay, which actually can be tackled with a tried and true method. We have a template and a sample essay, which we'll give you a link for at the end of this video. We're going to be tackling ACT essay last. To start us off, we're going to be talking about the final 5 points in the math section. Reading and science, we're actually already done with those. We're just reviewing at this point. And English, we have another 5 points to add on. And then you can count yourself completely prepared in terms of seeing all the material that you're going to see on test day. It's just up to you now to practice. Speaking of which, since we're introducing new things in math and English, we'll give you a chance to practice. For math, we are looking at first probability, statistics, and interpreting data. That's actually not going to take us very long, and neither is trigonometry because SOHCAHTOA is the way to go with that. We're going to review some new ideas in reading and science, but it's not new material. So it's just a new way to help you get even more points. And then for English, writing strategy and organization, you will figure out why we've been telling you all along to not skip around. And we'll show you exactly how to do that. The not skipping around part, not the actual skipping around. We don't endorse that. What we do endorse, though, is thinking about test day positively. So number of desired outcomes over total number of outcomes, we want you to feel 100% confident on test day. So number of desired outcomes is 1 awesome test day. Number of total outcomes, hopefully, is 1 awesome test day. So that's 100% awesomeness on test day. Now, I have found that if I don't bring an umbrella, it will rain. If I do bring an umbrella, it won't rain. But technically, that's not actually probability. That's just my own superstition. If I wanted to calculate the probability that it will rain, if I know that the probability it won't rain is, let's say, 1/10. The probability it won't rain is 1/10. Well, the probability that it will rain is 9/10. And it's because you just take 1 minus 1/10 and you get 9/10. To find the probability that 2 separate events will both occur, you don't want to add them because you can't get anything higher than 1. I mean, we're very confident you're going to do well on test day, but we can't say we're 200% confident because that's just not right math or correct math. To say right math is not good grammar either. What we want to say instead is multiply. So this is kind of weird to think about. If you think about the probability that it won't rain as 1/10, then we know the probability that it will rain is 9/10. But let's say the probability it won't rain is 1/10 on Monday, and the probability it won't rain is 1/10 on Tuesday. What is the probability it won't rain on both days? It's actually crazy to think about. It's 1 out of 100. There's only 1% chance that it won't rain on both days. So bring that umbrella. Remembering to multiply the 2 probabilities is really, really important, and you can pick up points by doing that. Now let's try a really straightforward probability question. It has one tricky twist here in that we see the word not. It is in capital letters, but that doesn't mean you can't underline it as well. So we're reading through the question. Go ahead and read through that. And we know that the total goes in our denominator. And then we have to decide, do we put 8 on the top or do we put 20 on the top? We want 20 because it says not green. Very important. Wait a second, that's not in the answer choices. Alert, alert. We can reduce this. The correct answer, once we reduce, we divide the top and the bottom by 4, we get 5/7. And you can use your calculator to reduce that if you prefer, or you can do it in your head. Points for us for probability. Matrices look really complicated, and it's considered part of interpreting data. And we don't want you to be worried about this idea of multiplying the row and the column, because a lot of times what it winds up looking like is not necessarily what you see right there on the screen, but instead something much friendlier like this. So go ahead and take a moment to read through this information. So now that you've read through this information, you are going to find that all you have to do is take the row and multiply it by the column. So we're multiplying by 0.3. And then 0.3 all the way across? We're going to multiply by each corresponding item. And then the only thing you have to remember is don't then, once you get those 4 different or however many items you have in a matrix, make sure you don't then multiply them. That's not what we're doing. We're actually adding them. So what we wind up, I'm going to smush it all the way down at the bottom so it's easier for you to see. So we have 9, 10, 12, and 4. If you were to multiply those all together, you would actually figure out pretty quickly that that's not the correct answer because there's no answer choice that is that large. So if you were to accidentally multiply them across, you would back up really quickly. Instead, what we want to do is we want to add. One thing to keep in mind for test day is don't erase. Unless you're running out of room for some reason, crossing out is actually a whole bunch faster. So we strongly recommend that you get used to crossing things out rather than using your eraser and, oh, heaven forbid, if the paper tears. And we just want to make sure that you are nice and efficient all the way through. So we think about those test day moments as well. We have the correct answer is 35, and you just solved a matrices question. So it looked really complicated, but just all we did was we basically took that column and we, well, you're a mirror image to me, so we swung it over and then multiplied and added. Once you practice a couple of these, you're really going to get the hang of it. For trigonometry, oh my goodness, this is not going to take us long at all because SOHCAHTOA is the way to go. You want to remember the S, the C, and the T are the anchors. So we have sine, cosine, and tangent. And then cosecant, secant, and cotangent are actually just reciprocals. Cotangent is really easy to remember because it sounds just like tangent. Be careful not to get cosecant and secant mixed up. Look at this, make a flashcard of it. Make sure you know the difference between the two because you might see them especially in the later questions. You know that the section goes from easy to medium to hard. So let's try it out. For SOHCAHTOA, you're always working with a triangle. So one of the first things you can actually do is make things a lot easier for yourself by drawing a triangle. Why not? Make it visual. Draw a beautiful picture, and then you can say, I spy with my little eye something triangular. We can put our theta right there. And we have cosine is 15 over 17. So don't do that out loud on testing. SOHCAHTOA. So we have A, which is adjacent. H is our hypotenuse. And here is where you can save yourself a bunch of time. Sure, you can do the Pythagorean theorem. You have some answer choices though, so don't actually do the calculation. It has to be the number 8. Wait, but now I have 3 numbers and like a whole bunch of gobbledygook in my answer choices. What did they want again? They wanted tangent. So TOA, O, ah. So opposite, so that's opposite of my theta, is my O, and adjacent is my 15. So actually you could get rid of anything that doesn't have 15 in the denominator, and then just double check, do you need your hypotenuse or do you need your opposite? And the correct answer here is answer choice B. Answer choice C is hypotenuse over adjacent, and you know because 17 is the biggest one. In any right triangle, the longest side is the hypotenuse. Has to be. That's how it works. For trigonometry, you're actually just talking about 2 points out of 36. So if you're still working on things like coordinate geometry and plane geometry, do those first because together those add up to 13 points versus trigonometry, which is 2 points. But on Grokkit, keep in mind that you can customize your practice. So you can pinpoint whatever types of questions you want to work on, and that way you can feel that much more comfortable. ACT reading is actually review. We've done all 4 passage types. The passages are always in the same order, but you don't have to answer them in the same order as every other test taker. You get to pick and choose which order you want to do them. However, the wrong answer traps for every single question you're going to see, they don't change. They've only invented 5 and they really like them because they're really good. So If you can identify those wrong answer traps, you can actually use elimination to your advantage. Getting rid of 3 wrong answers is the same thing as finding that 1 right answer, unless you're doing math, in which case you need to eliminate 4 wrong answers. But for ACT reading, you are going to find that you are falling into very specific traps. Some of our students will fall into extreme answer traps again and again. Other students find that distortion are really tricky. Other times, misused detail sound really, really good because you heard it somewhere in the passage, but it doesn't answer the specific question asked. Out of scope means it could be true, but not necessarily. And opposite means that you have probably read the question too fast. It's the opposite of what you thought it was supposed to be. So as you are going through the material you've already covered, actually look at those answer choices. You want to review the questions you've answered incorrectly as well as the questions you've answered correctly. Find your pattern, figure out what to look for, and these answer traps have really common words that you see throughout. The only way you're going to be able to establish that, though, is if you review what you've already done. If you haven't done much work already, now's the time to do it. For ACT Science, this is actually really exciting because you don't have to memorize any wrong answer traps. For ACT Science, the first thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to lose points because you're looking at the wrong table, chart, or graph. So use the power of your pencil and circle what you're supposed to be looking for. Then keep in mind that before you ever get to the questions, you should have a good idea of what's going on in the experiment. Know your independent and dependent variables. And in these experiments, oftentimes there's more than one independent variable and more than one dependent variable. Not always will there be 2 of each, but you want to be on the lookout. Constants are the parts of the experiment that the scientists kept the same. So if you have a series of experiments, chances are they're going to keep a few things similar so you can look over the 2 or 3 experiments that they have. You can look at what changed. What did they do slightly differently? What did they explore? And that way, when you get a question that asks, okay, what would you do next? You have a good idea of what's going on. Now, for direct and indirect relationships, knowing these is so helpful. We cannot stress this enough. If you have 2 variables in which as you increase one, the other one increases. So if you have an independent variable and you increase it, the scientist then will measure the dependent variable. If it increases as well, that's a direct relationship. If you see a pattern, that's a direct relationship. An indirect relationship is in which the independent variable is increased and the scientists measure the dependent variable, and the dependent variable goes in the opposite direction. So with your direct and indirect, you can call it inverse relationship if you prefer, you are going to see this time and again, and they ask so many questions about this. So make sure that you grab points in this because you have looked at this ahead of time. For ACT English, we promised we would make sure you have some practice because we're talking about 5 additional points. And we have told you all along, do not skip around. You don't want to wind up with 5 fewer points than everybody else because you didn't take the time to read the in-between sentences as you're reading the entire essay. The essay is written just as a peer would write the essay. In English class, oftentimes teachers like to have students exchange papers and then review each other's work. That is something that's really valuable. You want to be able to review peer work and you want to be able to review your own work. Colleges look for that. So wow them with a great ACT English score. Writing strategy questions are going to ask about tone and consistency. They're going to ask about adding and deleting information and the purpose of a passage, paragraph, or detail. The only way you're going to figure that out is if you have a good grasp of the entire passage without skipping around. For organization, these usually amount to only about 1 point out of 36, but grab those points because you are going to have a great idea of how to organize it once you've read the entire thing. So take a look at this particular question. Go ahead and read the entire paragraph. You don't see any underlines anywhere, but you're going to read the entire paragraph, and then you'll be able to figure out what would be missing. So now that you've read the entire paragraph, what's nice about this question is that they're not asking you if you should add or if you should or should not delete it. They're saying, if we were to delete it, what would happen? And as you read that paragraph, it should sound very similar to something you might read from a classmate. This isn't supposed to be scholarly work. This is supposed to be something that is familiar, something that is written in a language and style that makes sense to you. So for this particular question, they are definitely going to be deleting it, and we have to figure out what it is that is being added. So the particular part, it says, no matter what variables the growing season presents. Okay, so variables of the growing season, maybe not enough water, perhaps there are types of insects they hadn't counted on, but no matter what, the farmer gets paid. So that provides an additional incentive or an additional reason why farmers would be interested in such a program. And that would be answer choice B. Having a good idea of what is happening in the passage, first of all, is the way to go. And secondly, if you can formulate a reason why and then match it up with an answer choice, that's very similar to what you're doing with ACT reading. Now let's pick up some more points. This is organization. Again, it's about 1, maybe 2 points on test day, but this actually could take you a long time to do. They want to know the most logical order of sentences in paragraph 4, and it's labeled as 4. Take a look at the answer choices. What do you see that is similar or different among those? G and J both start with sentence 3. H starts with sentence 4. So here are your options. Either it's going to start with sentence 1, sentence 3, or sentence 4. Do not consider 2 and 5 as possible intros. Do this really strategically. So go ahead and read through this and decide whether or not sentence 3 should be the opener. If you've decided on sentence 3, then you get to choose what comes next. Another thing to keep in mind too is that either sentence 5 or sentence 2 is going to close. As you rearrange the elements, you're going to find that answer choice J is perfect. Now here's the kicker. Once you rearrange the paragraph, if they then ask you about arrangement of the paragraphs as a whole, you have to remember how you would have rearranged it. So let me explain it in a slightly different way. In this paragraph, there are 5 puzzle pieces. It is very possible that they're going to be asking you about the bigger puzzle pieces within the passage. As you're moving things around, keep in mind that this particular paragraph, even though it wasn't set up originally the way that you would recommend it, as you're moving things around, think of it as it's been corrected. So this is it doesn't happen very often, but you want to be prepared for the fact that they may be asking you to rearrange things within a paragraph and then within the passage. So just assume that things have been moved around so that they're more logical, and then adjust accordingly. Speaking of adjusting accordingly, what is popping up on your screen is actually super helpful. A link to our blog in general is very helpful because we have great resources there. But you know what's really interesting? A lot of the anxiety that comes from this type of essay is just not knowing exactly what's going to happen, not knowing whether or not enough preparation has gone into it, and not really knowing what they're looking for. So there are a few things we can do. First, we can give you a template. A template is a really helpful foundation. You don't have to follow it exactly, but it's good for anyone who's thinking, all right, I think I've got all the elements, but I don't know if I'm putting them in the right place. I'm not sure if it's long enough. That is something that's super, super helpful to see. Then also we have a sample essay. That's one of the best ways for you to take a look at, okay, what would score a 12 out of 12? Keep in mind, this does not count towards your composite score. And actually, this essay is often thought as being harder than the SAT essay in terms of getting a higher score. So we've heard from some of the most elite colleges that you definitely don't want anything lower than an 8 out of 12, but that it's not going to hinder your admission into a top tier school if you have at least an 8 or above. So first of all, just make sure you take a deep breath about that and don't put too much emphasis on this. But we can say that if you can get that 12 out of 12, that is going to look very impressive because not many students can do that. So practice ahead of time, know what the directions are so you can save yourself a ton of time, and also write as much as you can. Word count counts. Another thing that you can think about, we have actually really specific tips for you in terms of what you want to make sure you have. An engaging intro sentence is not necessary, but it's a really good idea if you want to score above an 8. A thesis is necessary no matter what score you want. To get at least a 6, you're going to need a thesis. An intra-sentence for each body paragraph is going to push you 8 and higher. Refutation of counterarguments sounds hard to comprehend just in terms of listening to that statement, but this is what actually makes the difference in terms of that 9 versus 10 versus 11 versus 12. Not only do you want to say that you are correct in your point of view, you also want to acknowledge that people might not agree with you. So you could say, well, some people may say, or while some may say. You then want to think about at least one sentence of saying, yes, some people may think, and then make sure you disagree with it. Don't just leave it hanging that, oh yeah, some people disagree with me, ... Make sure you then refute it. But you could actually work in an entire paragraph if you have enough time, and make sure you look at our sample essay so that you can see how to do exactly that. Smooth transitions are super helpful. They are not essential to making sure that you score an 8, but in terms of a 12, you're going to need those smooth transitions. So even sophisticated ones like not only but also, or it is clear to see, or anything a little bit above and beyond to begin, or first, second, and third. Anything that's a little more sophisticated is definitely going to read really well. And then a zinger, this is for the really high scoring essays, is any statement at the end or question that really leaves the reader feeling either satisfied or wanting more, or feeling like you've really summed up what you were trying to say. So there are a lot of different ways to do that, and it really just is the idea of capturing the reader's attention, but at the bottom part of the essay as well as at the beginning. So nice sandwich. Speaking of sandwiches, make sure that as you are studying, you are hydrating, you are nourishing your body as well, and keep that in mind for test day. So as you go into this final stretch before test day, when you're competing, I guess, with yourself, but also completing your work on either Grocket or in the Red Book or both, you are pacing yourself. You are keeping in mind how much you want to get done and setting up a schedule for yourself. And if you prefer to work solo, no problem. Anything that's not already marked as done in your study plan tab, that's what you have left. Make sure you find time to do this now and not, 24 hours before the test. If you want to join group practice, that would be fabulous. Whenever you see Taco Pete, that is a game that I set up for you. Hop in or create your own. And then, of course, your Red Book is highly recommended. Every time you sign up for the ACT, you're eligible for a free practice test, and you can download it on their website. If you prefer to use that, that's absolutely fine. But if you're going to take an entire practice test, then take an entire practice test. Actually time yourself and see how you do in terms of stamina and score.